we're gonna do a little something different today. I decided to talk a little bit about animation, what goes into it, in the best way that I can think about how to explain animation at the beginning of it. There's a lot to it, but you really need to know a lot of fundamentals to it. And I think if you start to know more about animation, the better you can get an understanding about motion in general, especially when it comes to illustrations, because every single frame of animation is an illustration when you think about it. I'm using right now Clip Studio to do animation. As you can tell, there's like a timeline on the bottom here. Just want to make sure it works. I'll just let people come in, and we'll kind of settle into this as simply as I can. I need to get some water. Could you give me a minute? I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, what's animation? Simply put, animation is the illusion of life. When you take a bunch of drawings into a plane and start to move all the independent frames of a drawing and put it into motion, it turns into animation. Yay, magic. So I'm just gonna simply, first off, just gonna show you the simple basics, just like as simple as I can put this. So I'm gonna just make a circle. This is gonna be the simplest animation known to man. But here we are. Here we are with a circle. Just a regular plain ass circle. That I am trying to make actually look like a decent circle. And as artists always know, it's like making a circle is always the most difficult thing to do. So if I have like this circle, and now I'm going to, let's see, maybe I could, animation in Clip Studio is very, very interesting. I don't necessarily know how to duplicate a frame. I'm wondering, let me see. Actually, you know what? I do know how to. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, set this to 2. I'm going to move it over a little bit. I'm going to duplicate this next one, hopefully. Please, let me. Thank you. I'm going to move it over a little bit more. Duplicate that again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that. Whoops. Oh, it moved on its own. There we go. Alright, so now one more duplication. And going to move that furthest I can. So now we have this animation. Let's play this. So that's simply put the simplest looking animation that I could muster. It's just like this one circle moving slowly. Let's turn on the onion skin and kind of show. So the red drawing is the frame after this frame, and the blue is the frame before this frame. So what you're looking at right now, if I'm on frame 1, you're looking at frame 2 in red. So if I'm on frame 2, you're seeing frame 1 in blue, and frame 3 is in red, and so on and so forth. These can be changed in the settings of I believe in the preferences. You can't see it right now, but there are settings within Clip Studio where you can basically change how much the onion layer will show off. Damn, where are those settings? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I believe they're in the animation tab. So let me see here. Probably should have looked into these before. Here we go. Register onion. Oh, wait. No, that's not it. Register onion skin images. I've never seen that one before. Oh, here we go. Onion skin settings. So yeah, I could basically show off how many frames previously, how many before. So it will basically show off how many frames ahead within these onion skin settings. Do I remember where the hell that was?
Well. Let's see what we got here.
Warancio, thank you so much for that follow. Yeah. Oh, so okay. Show animation cells, onion skin settings. I don't usually work with that many. You know, usually I don't like show any frames before it. But just in purposes for this, just for these purposes alone, let's keep it this way. I'm gonna like make a new. Let's see here. I have to make a new animation folder to which I have to set.
Wait a sec. Weren't you here before?
So, all right. So what we have here is from basically frame 1 to frame 5. So this is 1, and as we move the timeline, we see that the further and further the shape is from the last, this is the ease to this is the ease. This is what we're calling, like, it basically is like a, hang on, oh, let's make that closer. It's much closer than I'm pointing out, honestly, because what it basically means is that this is an animation ease in. So you notice how the animation in these frames, where the shape is in relation to the first frame. So we start off with the first one, the second one's like slightly farther away, third one is a little bit more, 4 is even more, and the fifth one is like the farthest away from it. You can keep going on, like I could probably like keep going on. Gonna duplicate another one and this one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically make it go from easing in to easing out. So it eases, it's slow to a start, and then it slows to a stop. So from there, let's see, like 6. Whoops! Uh-oh. I think I worked on the wrong layer. Excuse me a minute. So yeah, that's exactly what I did wrong. And 8 is like very, very close. So you see how this works? This animation, like, it slowly starts up and then gains momentum, and then it slows to a stop. So with the illusion of life that we have performed in this animation, it basically shows how slow from frame 1 to frame 5 it starts, and then as it is further apart from it, you know, the farther the image is from the first frame. This is just like, this is basic animation movement in general. Give me a second, there's some things I need to close out. The problem that I have usually with the timeline being down here is that it'll usually open up the pop out of the folders in my tab on the bottom there, so that might be an issue. But yeah, if this is like just a basic fundamental animation, this is like the ease in, ease out sort of thing. Now, second thing I want to show you is now that we have this ease in, ease out, I want to show you what can basically happen when we start using squash and stretch. So I can probably like put these in regular folders. So I'm gonna like copy this circle, and now with my just doing it myself instead of like copying it, I'm going to try to apply just a little bit of squash and stretch, not a lot. But if you notice that I'm sort of moving, like I'm changing the shape of the circle ever so slightly. I'm keeping its amount of weight that it has to it, but I'm slightly stretching it a little bit because it is moving. And now that we have like an even further shape, I could stretch it out even more, because now we're going from ever so slightly to an even more drastic stretch. And this is even more of a stretch. So now this shape is basically like, if you think about how a balloon, not a balloon, a water balloon, how the liquid inside a balloon can be molded and shaped depending on the weight that it's surrounded with. So when you hold like a water balloon and you see like, you know, the weight of the water is basically pushing down this, onto the balloon itself, that stretches to the point where it's now creating a more stretched shape. And the weight of that, like if you, okay, think about tossing a water balloon. Like if you toss that, you know, it's like the physics of the water within that balloon are basically kind of like they adhere to the surrounding air, and it's you know, science shit. Oh God, if I could explain that, if I could explain physics better. But here we're basically just kind of simply showing that the change of shape between frames, like, this looks weird on its own, right? It's like you look at this shape on its own and you think like, well, this is probably going to be very weird. It's probably going to be very weird on its own, just to like look at it. But now but when it's in motion, it goes by a bit quickly that it's like you can tell that there's some weight to the shape when it moves. But as it goes by so fast, you don't really notice that. That's why we say it's the illusion of life. We're not necessarily, you know, we're seeing something drawn here. So, now that we have like this stretch, it's not stiff. It's not this stiff ball, this circle that is just from one side to the next. We're now showing that this ball can kind of like move at a pace where it feels like it has some weight to it. Something is keeping it, something is stretching it. I should also note that Clip Studio kind of renders animation a little bit terribly, depending on how big the file is. Let's see if this helps a little bit. Yeah, that helps out a little bit better. I'm gonna like bring down this timeline so that it could repeat itself, just so I can prove my point here. So you notice that between the circle on the top and the circle on the bottom, it has like you have different ideas of what this shape represents. It's like the shape on the top you could see as like, this is like a stiff cannonball. It could be like a baseball or something like that that's being thrown. It doesn't really have any sort of weight. I mean, it has like its own certain like shape and everything, but it almost feels like it's hollow. There really is nothing to it. But the circle on the bottom, we're now seeing this as like having some sort of weight to it. We could like, it could be anything. It could be like, you know, trying to think of like an explanation of what this could be interpreted as, but honestly, when it comes down to it, it's like this is the fundamental concept of animation feeling more lively. It has a little bit more like the squash and stretch. There's a smearing effect to it, but all in all, what I'm trying to show is that between these frames, you're noticing the movement. There's like there's a swing to it. Again, like stating again in the beginning of it, it slows into a fast pass through and then slows down at the end. And you could like add frames to this. I mean, I could honestly keep adding frames to this and to make it a little bit more smooth. But the thing about it is that the more frames that you put into it, depending how smooth you want it, could make it seem very slow or slow or sluggish, or even like it wouldn't have the same kind of impact as, say, these 8 frames. So if I add frames in between this, making it probably like 15 frames, if I were to, it would slow down the animation considerably. Also, I also should note that I'm animating this at 2 frames per second, which is like the best amount of frames per second to kind of actually let from something that shows up from the screen to your eyes, where it registers enough that it feels natural when it's an illustration. Stuff like CG, where you could basically have as many frames as you want, technically. The more frames that are put into it, the more there is fluidity to it, but it also it gives like a different feel to it. Let me see if I can change the frame rate for a minute. I don't know if I necessarily can. Playback settings. Okay. So change settings here. Oh, here we go. Okay, so or actually, no, this is just how many frames there are in the timeline. I haven't necessarily... Oh, here we go. Change frame rate. Okay, so it is at 24 frames per second. Now, let's change this to 15 frames per second. Let's see what that does. So, yeah, you notice there's a choppiness to it. You do get to see each individual frame a little bit longer, but it's considerably choppy. It's, the more frames that you put in between, or the more time that you put in between each frame, the more you're going to notice this kind of choppiness. And now let's change that to, I gotta stop this first. Let's change the frame rate to 30 frames per second. Make it considerably faster. That you'll notice that it doesn't seem as natural. It's going by a bit more quickly. The general rule for good animation is 24 frames per second. A lot of HD stuff probably will go by 30 frames per second. That's like CG animation. That's where it's like you can have more in between to it. You can have more movement in between, but it's like, you know. But that's CG animation. It's like there's also you're not making a drawing. You're taking like a model and making it move from one spot to the next. That's a little bit more advanced, but and there's also 60 frames per second, and I'd call that the Nintendo speed. That's technically the frame rate that your video games go in, and it's like you don't notice it, but it's like it's basically trying to make everything as smooth as possible, and blinks will happen really fast. Like there's flicker and all that. That isn't really necessary. If you I'm just going to show you for a minute what that looks like. Given the amount of frames that we have, this is going to go by, oh geez, this is going to go, look at that. That's 60 frames a second. That you blink and you'll miss everything. But you notice how you look at this and you notice how little in between there is to a certain thing. This is a repeat. This is like on a loop. But you notice how there's a lot of space in between where this circle is compared to here, between each frame. We are using this negative space as sort of like an illusion. We're using that space to basically show that from where this object is in relation to where it's going to be, you don't need to show it in this area between frames, because depending where the object is, the further it is from the next object in the frame, determines how slow or how fast something is moving. And you see that you see it with your eyes. You can see this sort of development happening. All right, so I need to change that back, because that's again, that's too fast. Again, 24 frames per second is probably like the best method to do this with. So I need to change the canvas size again. I should have. So I don't really need these two things anymore here. Now, what I'd like to show is, instead of like a straight line now, what we can do, maybe I should make a new animation. Give me a second. I'm gonna make a new one. I'm really sorry about this. I just want to like, there we go. Probably don't need to make it this big. This is just my my HD preset for when I do animation. So I'm gonna have a ball falling, basically. And once again, just gonna make like the stiff, just like the stiff circle, you know, nothing huge, nothing spectacular. We're basically gonna have this ball falling as if you dropped it at an angle. So I can turn on this, and oops, I need to remember. Okay, so now we have this ball falling. Duplicate this layer, put it in the frame, have it move a little bit further down. You know what? Maybe I should put more. I'm going to add more onion skin to this. So let's add more to the previous frame, and I'm gonna take away what's before it. There we go. Now we can see all of the frames before it. And that way I have a better idea of like the arch of movement with this. And so what we basically want to do is, I want to basically have this ball move from this point down to this point, and then have it slowed down basically more and more. So this arch, where we have like this ball moving down here, it's going to hit the ground. It's going to hit the ground here. It's going to bounce back up ever so slightly, come back down, hit the ground again, come back up, and then, you know, slowly trickle down to a stop. I'm looking at this. Maybe I could move this down a little bit more. So we have now this line of action. Probably a little bit more than I bargained for, but let's go ahead with it. So, farther the ball is from the last frame, we're showing off more and more where this ball can hit from this point to the ground. So this is its first hit to the ground. Moving on the ground. Got to duplicate again. One more frame. So now we're going to have it move back up. If you've noticed, from this point to this point, considering that the ball is kind of, as it's moving down, it's moving faster and faster to the ground. So it hits that ground immediately, and it will bounce back up immediately. So it will be farther from the ground in the next frame. Considerably. But as it moves down, as it goes back up, and now that I'm looking at this arch is far too high. So we could move it up a little bit. We can move it down a little bit more, just so I can make my point a little bit faster. So we duplicate this again, make another frame, and you'll see that this ball is now in the air. There is some sort of there is some sort of what's it called? You're gonna excuse me if I start to lose words while I'm talking, but it's basically having issues. God, why do you guys listen to me? I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't even know words. Oi. Oy vey. It's struggling to basically get back up into the air because it's going to fall again. In the dumbest possible way that I could say it. So, as it's struggling to basically fly back upwards, it's still... gravity is still pulling it downward. So, it's fallen, but as it hit the ground, it's bouncing back upwards. So it's gonna, like, you know, Newton's law. It's going to be coming back down.
Incoming connection!
So we have this slow in. It's probably like that. And duplicate again. Next frame. And now, and once again, the arch is far too... It's too far again. I need to, it's probably gonna do that for this too, so... this is temporarily a guideline for myself, honestly, just to, like, make sure that I'm putting all of these frames in the right line of action. So it's probably not even going to be very accurate, but now it's going to come back down. So we do, once again, the animation, the frames are further and farther from each other. Once again, it's going to hit the ground. So, it's now hit the ground again. And we still got one more bounce. So once again, goes back up.
Another one? Oh, this is gonna be fun!
Manasaro95, thank you so much for the follow. I am basically just duplicating frames over and over again because I'm just using the shape. I don't really need to draw this this ball over and over again necessarily. And we're going to have its final hit to the ground. And it's just going to basically ease into a slow roll. So when we're... You know what? Probably could be closer. And... the roll. Where it's basically easing to a stop. So this is 31 frames of animation, and no, that I have this, I can bring this timeline down a little bit. So these are 31 different drawings. 31 different drawings and 62 frames. And now that we have it at 24 frames a second, and we animate it. So now you notice this animation of this ball bounce going from where it starts to the top, where it's being dropped, hits the ground, and bounces slow to a stop. That's a basic pull and push of animation, and broken down in its most primal form of where it starts to where it ends. And you notice how the speed in which where the ball is in one frame to where it lands onto the ground, where it's separated from each other. So if again, like, if you wanted to make this as smooth as possible, listen, don't Richard Williams this. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. When I say the Richard Williams effect, it's basically all of these frames down here on the timeline will have a drawing. So that's not so much 2 frames a second. 2 frames. What is it called? This is 24 frames per second. And we're working on 2s. If you were working on 1s, all of these frames would have its own drawing. But since we're working on 2s, we're basically having 2 frames that are duplicate to each other, and it's not necessary. You can still see the illusion of this animation, of this ball bouncing from one spot to the next. It's magic. It's seriously, this is how, now let's put the red line away and we see how this works. So yeah, that's the ball bounce. It is, listen, when you see a ball and you drop it, and depending on what kind of material it is, if it has like air in it, if it's rubber, if it's a little bit more firm, it's going to depend on like how it's going to show how heavy an object is. So let me kind of show you just lines of action, what that kind of looks like. So if we were to say you had a bowling ball dropped in the same kind of line of action, so like a bowling ball or a cannonball, that's going to be a really heavy hit. So it's going to like fall down, and then it's just going to immediately, it will have some bounce. It's going to have some sort of bounce to it, but at the end of it, it's like it is really just being pulled to the ground as fast as possible. So it's like you will feel that weight of the bowling ball as it hits the ground, because it does not have the same kind of bounce that this does. Let's see. A baseball doesn't really have as much like weight as a bowling ball. It still is very firm. There's not like a lot of bounce to it, depending on the surface that you drop it at. But it's going to fall down, it's going to hit the ground, and it's going to have a little bit of bounce, and then just kind of like slow to a stop. And a rubber ball. Rubber ball it's basically made of a material that is made to bounce. So it's gonna definitely, depending on like the amount, or just from a drop, like from this distance, it's gonna bounce pretty high. It's gonna bounce again pretty high, but then it's gonna slow down, and it's gonna keep bouncing until it's like it slows to a stop. So that one's going to have a lot more bounce to it. I would consider this one like maybe a beach ball. Maybe not even a beach ball. Like what are those balls that are like they fill them up with air and you see them at Walmart a lot? The Target ball. It's not so much a beach ball. Because, what would you call those? Like a tether ball? No, that's not a tether ball. Well, at any rate, you're basically going to just, I got yoga ball. Yeah, okay, let's go with that. Yoga ball. Why not? Let's go with a yoga ball. Or a playtime ball, I don't know. But if you notice, depending on the line of action, how something is dropped with its line of action, you can tell the kind of weight that is put into it, the kind of how if it's light, if it's heavy. You just have to basically know between frames how far something should be from the next frame, because that will show speed and weight and all that. Now, the next lesson that I'm going to show you is basically, now that we have this line of action, now that we know these frames and how they and how it moves, I'm going to now try at least to take these frames. Oh, and I can't. Oh, shoot. I guess I need to make like a new. Here we go. I'm gonna lighten this up. And now I have to make a new animation folder. And this is gonna be tricky because so now I'm gonna do this basically by hand. Let me simulate. Okay, no, I can't. So, I'm going to try and squash and stretch. I don't even think that one needs to be that much. I'm going to now animate with squash and stretch. And this is going to drastically change the look and feel of the shape being animated. So as it hits the ground, the shape of this ball like splats. It's like you're basically having, like, if you throw one of those like squishy like sticky balls against the wall, don't do that, by the way. If you throw it against the wall, you will notice that it just basically kind of flattens. That is the amount of pressure that is brought to the shape of the ball against the surface from point A to point B to the ground, it's just kind of like, oh, you don't understand 2s and 1s. I will get back to that. Give me a second. But I just want to like, I want to get these. I'm not doing the shape justice, honestly. By the way, I saw Trolls World Tour today, and it's cute. That was okay. I might give I might give more thoughts on that later on. So the second bounce is probably not going to have as much of a squash to it, because it wasn't dropped at it. Like, if you think about the height and the speed of where it was dropped first here, as opposed to when it's dropped here, there's not going to be as much of a squish as it was here. So now we have this other hit to the ground that is not as powerful because it wasn't dropped as high, but it still needs to have weight. It still needs to show that there's like weight to this. There is like a consequence to when the ball hit the ground. And I'm doing my best to try and not make this ball drawing too close to the original, but still, it's like, you know, and now that it's dropped even closer to the ground, it still doesn't have that much of a push and pull. So the weight of this ball is still, there's still going to be weight, there's still consequence to when it hits the ground, but it's not as extreme. And it doesn't really need to be. Doesn't need to be that much of a stretch. And now that we reach the end of this bounce, the bounce isn't as extreme. There is no weight, there is no squash to the hit to the ground. It's basically now just slow to a roll. Slow to a roll, slow to a stop. Oh, wait. Starting to lose where the ball is. Okay, so. Alright, so now let's look at this on its own. See, there's like more weight to the ball now. There's more squash and stretch. There's more of a pull when it drops, and you can see that impact as soon as it hits the ground. Your eye basically sees this object falling, hitting the ground, bouncing, hitting the ground again, and then slowing to a stop. And now there's a little bit more movement to this ball, this object. There's a little bit more pull and push and squash and stretch. And now let's show it in comparison to the ball underneath. It's not as stiff, right? It's just like it shows you that there's consequence to this action. So that is a basic fundamental of animation. Just like in its as simple as it can be. So Robot X4X asked, doesn't quite understand what 2s and 1s mean. So okay, the animation that you're looking at right now is drawn in 2s. Now what that means, and let me bring that up on this. So, I'm gonna worry about that later. Okay, so all right. So frames. So this is 1s versus 2s. So on the timeline, where you have frames, like let's say, how many is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 8 frames. When you go by 1s, you're basically making one drawing for each of these frames. So you're making a new drawing here, here, here. All of these frames are basically taken up by a drawing. When you have it on 2s, you're making a new drawing every second frame. So each of these reds means that it's a new drawing. So there's a new drawing here. You don't need a new drawing here. It doesn't mean it's absent. It just means that this drawing is taking over this frame. So you basically have the same drawing on 2 frames. And then on the 3rd frame, you make a new drawing, and that takes over the 3rd and the 4th frame. And that is basically, so you have 1 drawing, 2 drawings, 3 drawings, 4 drawings, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drawings. Now, because of this, let's see this in terms of animation. So, if you have these drawings from here to here, let's say you basically have 8 drawings. So this is the first drawing. This is the 8th drawing. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me do this for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So each of these circles is another drawing. But if you're going by 2s, in the same length of time, you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4. So that from 1 to 8, you have 4 drawings in between those between those 8 frames. Um, that's the simplest way that I could put it. So what does this mean for animation? It basically means if you're drawing on twos, it's less. I don't want to say effort. I want to say less detail. Because you don't necessarily need every single frame to be filled in with a different drawing in order to get the message across. Richard Williams would differ on that opinion. But that's because he likes to fill in every frame. It's a lot more energy put into than it really needs to be. There is a certain fluidity to ones when it comes to animation. However, you can see now, because this bounce is done in twos, you can get the message and it still looks smooth. I could make this look smoother and I could make this look more fluid, but it won't have the same kind of impact. You kind of will see the difference between a lot. Actually, I think, if I remember correctly, I think there's a lot of animation in Japan done in threes, which kind of makes it a little bit more choppy looking. But when it comes to a lot of anime, it's like you don't necessarily need to have a lot of movement in a lot of the things that at least a lot of things that I've noticed, but they will still animate on twos for certain scenes if there needs to be more action. It kind of saves up in both the amount of energy that is needed to go into every drawing. I could be wrong on that. I have seen animation done on threes. It's fine. But for the most part, a lot of animators, especially if they're working in 24 frames per second, so every second is 24 frames, you only need to draw 12 different drawings within every second of that animation. So if you have 24 frames per second and you're animating on twos, you're going to be making 12 different drawings. However, you can still cheat these depending on the amount of action that is shown, like the kind of energy that is in a certain movement. Sometimes when you just have characters standing and talking, you don't necessarily need to animate on every single frame. You just need to have animation done on the moments where their mouth needs to move. I've done that several times myself with when it comes to lip syncing. I've had frames go all over the place. Sometimes I will animate most of the time when I animate, especially when I have characters talking. Sometimes I will work certain frames on ones, and sometimes I will work certain things on twos, depending on how quick a movement needs to be shown. If you sometimes animate on ones, it just means like maybe you want to have like a singular action show up really fast, or if you show it up on twos, it's just enough to show the action that is needed. Overall, this is what I basically would show to anyone that is basically just an intro. It's like it is definitely introducing themselves to animation. Is simple shapes, knowing the slow ins and slow outs, how fast something should, like, in the span of a couple frames, how fast you can make something look, depending on how far each frame is from the other drawing. So, yeah, I don't know. This is animation, guys. This is intro. This is your intro to animation. I could keep going. I could keep, like, discussing more and more about this, but I feel like we could probably save it for another day. So, I'm glad you guys could join me for this little intro to animation. I really kind of was debating talking about this, but I felt like I think knowing the fundamentals about animation would help in terms of, like, how you think about movement and action. And the only way to know about that is to know about animation, how movement works in general. Animation does take a while to kind of, like, get all the fundamentals in, but if we can, like, if I can give off, like, live tutorials about different types of animation and the fundamentals of it throughout the week, then we could move on to discussing action and line of action and stuff like that. Either way, I know this was, like, a very, very simple stream. I know that there wasn't a whole lot to it, but I do hope that it kind of showed you what's involved with animation. Give me a second. I'm gonna, like, change. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do.
Another one? Oh, this is gonna be fun!
I'm going to make GIFs of these, and I'll post them on my various platforms and stuff like that. But, again, the video is going to be on YouTube. If you want to look at it again, or if you missed it and you want to watch it again, go to my YouTube channel, Electronic Heroes, and or search up Andrew Dickman. Either way, you're going to find my channel. But I'm going to post this on YouTube if anyone had any questions about it. Well, anyway, are there any questions that anyone would like to ask, considering the lesson that I showed off right now? I know that some people came in late, but if there's anyone that came in, has, like, I hope I answered the differences between ones and twos very succinctly as I could. I know I'm not the best explainer. The reason why I'm doing these live tutorials is because I feel people learn, like myself, learn better visually, and sometimes it helps to have, like, a little bit of talk on the side, just to kind of, like, if there's any sort of hint of, like, need to know or subtlety that is not explained well in the drawing itself, then, you know, I mean, that's why I'm doing these videos. I honestly, like, I like kind of explaining the process and my process, and if it helps anyone, great. uh, I just know that I have a lot of difficulty learning both from a book, especially if it's text heavy, but I do like when I learn from tutorials and they're visual, but I still need some sort of audio to kind of like hit the nail in the head. It's weird. It's like I'm in the middle where it's like I'm a visual learner, but I also still need to be told certain things in detail. Where did you get your experience in the field from? Well, I mean, like I went to college. I did learn the fundamentals about animation. My first job was at Warner Brothers doing character design, and it wasn't necessarily like animation like this, like movement and all that, but I think I learned more when I started getting into storyboarding, and that's when I started to really get into like just movement and action in general, because it's the first it's the first introduction to an animated product in a production. The storyboard is like the first actual piece of animation. Is it best to start with small objects when you try animating for the first time? Like start from small to then bigger objects? Definitely. Like I know that I worked with just like a circle for the animation here. I didn't want to do like any like facial things, like any like detailed characters or anything like that, because honestly, if you just start off with a character and you don't know anything about general animation, like I don't want to even say tricks, just kind of like animation concepts and rules, which I hate to call them rules because essentially they are, but at the same time, it's like you can take those rules as lessons to basically give you an idea of how you can handle something. So it's not so much rules, they're lessons. But they're important. There's a reason why they're called rules. It's because it works. It's how a lot of animators learned how to animate. I certainly learned animation very differently from a lot of, say, like college majors and very experienced animators, like in features and stuff like that. So I certainly learned animation, like, not so much through osmosis, but I will say, like, I learned animation very, very differently. I approached it very almost chaotically, and there was a lot of trial and error with like my view of animation, because my first animation teacher was in high school, and they didn't necessarily like teach you how to animate. They basically said like, hey, you have an idea, draw it and animate it. That was the weirdest experience for animation, but honestly the best, because I really just kind of like went into it like head first and just kind of like bits and pieces gained knowledge from other types of concepts of what animation is involved. I don't recommend it. I certainly will not say that it is the way to learn animation. 'Cause think about this. I got into it when I was 10. And it's a very early age to learn animation, but I think it was a good start for me, because as years went by, it's like I started to gain more knowledge from it, but I was also all over the place. I was doing illustration comics, Animation was something I wanted to get into, but I didn't necessarily know everything that needed to get into it. Anyhow, what's the best program to use for animation? I use Clip Studio. It's easy for me. I also have Harmony, but that's really expensive. There's other programs out there, like, off the top of my head, think. You can animate in Photoshop, actually. Technically, any program that you have, it's a means to animate somehow. You could basically, in the most primitive way, just take one drawing, go to another layer, lower the opacity of the drawing underneath, and draw over the other one. Export all of those layers into different frames, and import those into Premiere or another video program, and just frame by frame put all of those drawings in a sequence to create your animation. I mean, honestly, the world is your play place. You just have to, I will not say that any program is the best program to animate from, because that's honestly a lie. It's like whatever program that you can be used to drawing could be used in some form for animation somehow. I do like Clip Studio EX for its animation program. There's a couple things that I wish they would implement, like audio scrubbing, which is basically like if I go back and forth between the timeline and I had like sound in there, you would hear the sound based on where you're scrubbing the view of the timeline. That hasn't been implemented yet. That is in other programs. There's some other programs I can't. TV Paint. I mean, it's also a very expensive program, but I know people who will vouch for that program, really enjoy it. Flipnote Studio. That's a good example. Do I have to buy a CSP-EX? Well, that's a question for the people that make Clip Studio, honestly. I do know that Clip Studio EX goes on sale quite often during the year. It's probably the most inexpensive program, even at full price. At least in my experience. That's my intro to animation. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I know this was short. I know this was not as detailed. But I do hope that it kind of opened you up to what animation is involved, or what's involved in animation. And there's several more lessons that I could teach about just animation in general. I actually considered discussing antics today, but when I thought about it, I thought well, that's kind of it's a little bit advanced, especially if you don't really know much about animation. And I didn't want to start animating before I got into general concepts of animation so far. But I'll do more animation stuff in the future to discuss. I know that a lot of the stuff that I talked about has been illustrative. I do want to get into storyboarding as well. Again, I really kind of feel like you should know about animation stuff before getting into storyboarding, because there is important things to know about animation that are involved in storyboarding. You need to know stuff about movement. You need to and layout, as well. There's tons of stuff that I could talk about, but I want to like ease people into it. It's going to be we're going to have a lot of live tutorials in the future. I'll assure you of that. Anyway, thank you so much. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about Trolls World Tour. I liked it. I thought it was cute. It still had the same problems I had as the first one, where I think the message was a little muddled a little bit. It had a good message, but I mean, at the same time, how it got to that point was, I feel like they didn't like talk about it that, they didn't get into it that much. Again, thank you so much for your follows, your subscriptions. I really appreciate it. We're halfway to another emote I mentioned. Hopefully at some point we can unlock that and I can make another emote to just kind of do things. And again, I want to do these live tutorials more often. I think I've kind of realized that doing video game stuff, someone else can do it better, not me. Take care, guys. I'll be back Wednesday with another live tutorial. I'm gonna keep this stream train going with trying to do these 3 times a week, and if I'm feeling up to it, I might come back on Tuesdays and Thursdays with some of my own drawing stuff. I do need to make a ref sheet for Sonata. Oh, by the way, new downloadable content on my website, Tapas Webtoon. Please look up downloadable content if you like my work. Give me a follow or like there, whatever you want. Thank you so much, everyone. Please take care.